Chronicles, and I'm joined once again by Jocelyn Short.
Hi, everyone.
She is a concept artist and digital creator, so for all your logos and characters and monsters and things you want to have drawn up, hit her up. Link to her website will be on the description of this episode when I upload the audio. Today, we are talking about space sweepers. Uh, the podcast a couple weeks ago, I think we went through Jung E. And I think I mentioned I wasn't that familiar with the Korean sci-fi action films that were out there, and that was my first jaunt into some of their films, and it was a surprise and really awesome. So we made the leap again to go back to watch Space Sweepers, what I think came out in 2021. Um, set in the year 2092 and follows the crew of a space junk collector ship called the Victory. When they discover a humanoid robot named Dorothy that's known to be a weapon of mass destruction, they get involved in a risky business deal. Full of action. I think we were talking before about, you were mentioning something about it being kind of derivative, or you saw influences, you said.
Like I said, I don't know I don't know what inspired, the Korean creators of this film, but I saw similarities to some things. So I don't know if you've heard of or have played the Horizon series, Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West, those games. Have you heard of them?
I've played Horizon Zero Dawn. I have not touched Horizon Forbidden West yet.
Okay. A lot of what was going on story-wise in some of the characters, and even just the premise itself, reminded me a lot of Horizon Zero Dawn. Also elements of like Final Fantasy VII, in regards to like the eco-terrorism, this idea of like a Gaia kind of coming to, like that's meant for rebirth of the planet, just like themes of global climate crisis.
Yeah.
You know, I thought it was so interesting. Like, but generally the concept of just like the climate crisis and how how to deal with that. I like the villain a lot, or at least,
Sullivan?
yeah.
He had a god complex.
He did. I mean, and it's like he's not. I wouldn't say he's necessarily revolutionary as a villain. Like he's not anything I haven't necessarily seen before.
Yeah.
But I guess I liked how committed he was to his evilness. Like he
was all about it. I like the fact that how diverse the cast was. From like the main cast was Korean, but we see like a multilingual cast.
I thought that was so cool.
Someone was speaking Arabic, French. They of course were speaking Korean. Sullivan spoke English.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, because the crew is basically broke. They're all in debt for everything and owe money. Later on, with Uncle Ty, we find out why he's in debt. But basically, everybody's flat broke, which is why they are collecting space junk. They've got like this kind of utopian colony that is protected, and that's probably for like the uber rich or who's in control. Sullivan, I'm assuming, deems who's worthy to be on that colony. And then you have Earth, which is like barely habitable, and they've got this weird space station floating in its orbit.
Yes. Another story that this reminded me of was Cyberpunk 2077. Like I haven't played the game yet. I haven't played it yet. I did watch the show Edge Runners, and the way that this world is set up reminded me of how the world in Cyberpunk is set up.
I played Cyberpunk all the way through. Basically, Cyberpunk, a lot of the Cyberpunk things are basically broke folks having access to technology. So you get like a mix of things that are really cool and new as far as technology wise, but
Hmm.
when you get people that are broke that have access to them, so it kind of has a different look to it. It's not always as shiny as we see in some of the other sci-fi stories because of who gets their hands on the technology and how they come about getting it.
Hmm.
The movie Jung E that we had watched before had a lot of these same themes with the fact that people were living on these space stations off planet because of things had gone so horribly wrong on
Hmm.
Earth that they just messed everything up. So they're seeking, this Sullivan guy is trying to basically make another colony on Mars. Um,
Yeah, I'm glad that the movie answered a question that I had like kind of right away, which was like, because they show that there's, the whole civilization on Mars that is like, completely full of greenery and habitable, and everyone's, lots of people are there and thriving.
well, they're
Um,
going there. I don't think they've gone there yet. They're about to.
oh, okay, got it,
That's
got
the
it.
whole thing. They did it in this little. It looked like a half planet outside of Earth where he had made this
So like just a
plateau.
colony, just like a
Yeah,
colony. Okay,
that was the one that he had made as like a go between.
got
But
it.
then he was figuring if he could do the same thing with Mars that he did with this little colony, then they would have a place for everybody to go. Except for he never really planned for everybody to go
Right.
there, but he wanted no options. That was his game. In my mind, that was his game plan. He wanted nobody to have no options. And if we lost the majority of the people on Earth, then that would make his other plan that much more valuable. And he already had a place where like the uber rich were already sat there. So like, you
Hmm.
want the real planet experience that we had on Earth, but somewhere else, and we'll be able to go to. And that was his whole thing. And that was the reason why. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't watched Space Sweepers, but I mean, y'all had 2 years to watch it before we discussed it. Um, but in the beginning, the crew of the Victory is searching through this space junk, and they get like this news alert about this android that looks like a normal human female child, but it's actually a weapon of mass destruction that everybody's looking for.
Hmm.
And there's like, of course, there's a bounty, they can collect. And of course, everybody wants this bounty because they're all broke. In the initial, I thought it was funny the first scene where they're fighting over like the scrap ship that crashed into like one of the satellites, and so everybody's fighting each other to get this scrap to try to turn it in. That was a crazy scenario.
I thought I was like, man, this sucks so bad. Like this is so awful. Like everyone's poor everywhere on Earth and outside of Earth, and and like and then you got this group that is just the best at it. All right, just coming in and taking all of the junk that so nobody else can have it. And I was like, this sucks. Like,
It does.
this sucks so bad because it's not even it's like you just have to be good, and not even just good at that, right? Not even just good at space sweeping, but you have to be excellent at it in order to take what everybody else has in order to get what you need. And that stressed me out so much. I was like, they can't even go home and like cash in on their efforts at all. Like this sucks.
Andrea says, I saw Space Sweepers a while back. I'd place it right in the middle of not good and not bad. I barely remember much of it other than the robot and the kid. They were memorable. Those two characters were, I think, Bubs.
Yeah,
Uh,
Bubs. Hey, Andreas. The Bubs was really cool. I could
yeah.
definitely see him being a toy, like like having an action figure of Bubs with his harpoon.
Her?
Just her. You're right. Yes, her. Flinging her harpoon. Um, so that was really cool. I liked Bubs a lot. She was
Yeah,
great.
Bubs was funny. He was the only one. He was the only one. I mean, she was the only one that wasn't broke on the ship. They had a stash
That's
of
true. She
cash
was.
in a
Yeah,
trunk. Everybody else was Tiger Park was a cool character. The guy I think with the dreads who ran the engine room. Captain Jang, the pilot, was cool. You were saying how good they were, but even at them being successful at that first,
I was just
like
about to say.
they still owed, like the
Yeah,
money they would have earned, they still owed because my man hit the antenna on the way in, and they owed like back taxes to the point where like the bank owned the entire ship.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy. Like it just it was a it was a good metaphor kind of for how stuff just goes
Yeah,
where it just like one you ding one thing and it can set you back so much. And then also it's hard, like you can't even save. Like you can't manage your money when it's going that fast.
yeah.
So
That is very much adulting, I think, in a lot of ways. Like you work, work, work to get this money, and it seems like a lot of times it just goes in one hand and out the other because you have all the bills and things to worry about.
yeah, and I
We
kept
get a little bit of the backstory slowly about the various characters in this film, which I thought was interesting.
mhm,
Basically, Uncle Tay was a soldier, like a commander in the military, and through one of his missions, he ends up ruining this little girl. Finds a baby. Yes, the mom is dead. The family's dead. Only one that's left is this baby girl, which he ends up adopting, and finding out later that I guess he ruined. He feels it's his fault because she couldn't hear initially.
mhm,
Something. It was a loud noise as a baby, ruined her eardrums,
mhm,
and so he felt guilty. Took the baby in. He was supposed to return the baby to Earth,
mhm,
and he didn't. And then after going through all that, he could not kill anymore, and pretty much became useless to the military, I guess. And they kicked him out because he wouldn't do his job. And then he went from being rich and a citizen to being broke, and then they snatched his citizenship.
mhm.
Because remember that was the whole thing about when he lost his daughter. In order to search for her, they had some program where you could search with this little
Right,
transponder.
right.
But if you were a citizen, it was free.
Yeah.
If you were not a citizen, there was a fee, and they only took cash. And the money was so exorbitant that he obviously didn't have that money on hand. He was like, "But you just processed my case." You're like, "Oh, that's it. You ain't got the money right now. We can't do it. Next." So
It's kind
everybody had an individual story of how they became this weird, like, found family in space.
of
Um, what do you think about the action?
I thought the action was pretty good. I liked the design of all
Mhm.
the ships. Like I really liked watching the sequences where they were collecting the junk. Um, the I thought the fighting in space was pretty good. I thought it was all pretty compelling.
Yeah,
Um, so I liked it. I liked it
yeah.
a lot.
I, when I watched Jung E and this film, I was more prepared this time because Andrea were talking about it. She said I wasn't prepared to feel with the film before.
Mm,
So in preparation for this one, I was like, okay, maybe this is a thing with these type of films coming out of Korea. So I was prepared for something, and the stuff with the daughter, and the whole reason why Tay was so standoffish with Dorothy. And he's like, this is a robot. This is not a kid. And then they give you little clues that she is a kid, like she's actually an organic being and not a synthetic robot. Her
mhm.
story was really interesting,
Yeah,
how she came to be.
yeah. I thought I liked that they gave him, like I was worried at first that they weren't going to like give him a good reason for why he's acting the way he was acting
Yeah,
towards her, and like why he's like, I gotta get money at all costs, like I'll do anything for money. And I was like, okay, like are we gonna have a good reason for why, for just this standoffish bad boy type character trope? And they did, so I was really happy about that. I didn't expect this movie to be as emotional as it was. I also loved how like the little girl started calling everybody uncle right
yeah,
away. Like she was like, Uncle Tay, why is he scared of me? I was like, oh my god.
yeah. And it almost seemed like Tiger knew right away that at least he didn't.
He
There
didn't
was
know
no
she was
information I got that if he didn't see her as an android
yeah.
at
He
all.
treated her like a human first, even though he didn't know, which
Yeah,
was great. He jumped right in. I was like, oh. So yeah, that surprised me, and I'm glad it. To me, I felt like all of the emotion paid off, which I was really happy about. I was like, all right, if they're gonna give us feelings, please pay off on the feelings, and I felt like it was all worth it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But we very much got what we were like from the trailers and everything. I felt like we got what was advertised. But it wasn't just that. And I think a lot of times with most American films, when I think of like a sci-fi action, like, okay, this is a popcorn flick. I'm just gonna turn my brain off. There's no reason to feel anything. We're gonna watch stuff blow up. We're gonna be along for the ride. It's basically like a roller coaster, a visual roller coaster, and that's it. With these films, I feel like they do tie a lot of emotional stuff in uh, more in depth than most films that are coming out of the U.S. I think.
Yeah, I will also say I tried to watch this movie last night while I was painting, and I couldn't do it because it like I found that this movie required a lot of my attention. Like I couldn't not watch it because it like half of it was dialogue, and then like half of it was just like visually. Like you just need your full focus to like really follow what's happening, which is
Yeah,
good. That was great because the movie's long. It's a 2 hour 30 minute movie, and I was like, man,
yeah.
okay.
And even though I didn't understand a lot of the languages, I had to read the subtitles for the Korean, French, and Arabic parts when the various characters were speaking. I
Mhm.
did feel it was well acted. Um, no one was really over the top for me there. That was out of place or just not giving their all. You know, sometimes you can tell when people are even. I don't care what the language is. You can tell when somebody's like phoning it in. Like,
Yes.
and it was. I liked it. Like Andrea said, it wasn't super good. It wasn't horrible. I enjoyed it. I liked it for the action, but I like action. I like you give me that, then I'm happy. That's usually
Yeah.
one of my prerequisites. You give me a little bit of ass whooping, I'm good to go. You know, for the
Yeah.
time, I can sit through this. It was well acted. I like the special effects. Obviously, most of it's special effects because we're out in space. Um, with the chase scenes and the fighting, did these soldiers remind you at all of Chappie?
What's
Have you seen
Chappie?
the movie Chappie?
Mm-mm.
With the robots, there's a humanoid robot. I think Hugh Jackman is in it. And there's I forget who else is in it, but basically is a robot. It's a robot cop that becomes like a military model. They decide to get rid of them or something,
Mm.
and then Chappie. It's kind of like a modern day short circuit where the robot decides he wants to live like this human experience, this kind of coming of age, but they're
Mm.
still seeing him as this weapon, and the government tries to shut him down and capture him.
Mm.
Kind of squared off faces with the lights on them when I saw the soldiers and the ears would pop up reminded me of Chappie when I saw some of the soldiers in this film. And some of them, one of them looked like a super, I forget what her name was, but there was like a super soldier at the end.
Yeah,
Like
I that was so weird to me, that part. Because she seemed to come out of nowhere, and I was like, who are you even with? Like, we never seen her before. Um, I was just like, it reminded me of like Mass Effect when
hmm.
like when Kai Lang came into the picture out of nowhere, and I was like, I guess.
Yeah, well, yeah, you see her a couple times. They just flash her face, and you see the discolored eyes.
Mhm.
Also, Sullivan, I didn't know what was going on with his veins.
Yeah, that wasn't. I really don't think they gave you a reason for why he was doing that. I think it was just like, I think they thought it looked visually interesting and like to help portray him as like a villain. But I don't think they gave any reasoning as to why, any story reason as to why he had that stuff going on.
Yeah, I was
Um,
waiting for that because I don't know, I thought maybe perhaps he had tested the nanobots on himself, maybe.
that would make sense.
Yeah, because
But
maybe
they
so
could
there's a
have said
different
that.
strain of these nanobots running through his veins because it only seemed like when he was like emotionally triggered, then all of a sudden they started when he was talking and he started getting passionate or getting angry, then you see this discoloration start flowing through his veins into his arms. And it started off slowly where you just see it creep up his neck when he's
Hmm.
talking. They show this one scene where it starts to creep up his neck when he's talking. And then
Yeah.
again, when he starts getting crazy with some of the other characters, you see this. this weird like blackening of his veins throughout his hands.
Yeah, and his voice would distort, like it would be his voice and then another voice on top of it. And like at one point, when he was in the meeting with all those other people, um, on his in his area, like he it like at one point, he had all the veins coming up, and then his neck shot back, and it was a shot of his face. I thought something was gonna come out of him,
Yeah.
and then it was nothing, and I was like, oh, okay. So I was hoping for an explanation, but I kind of figured kind of right away that they weren't gonna give us one because we
Mm,
hadn't seen anybody else do that in
yeah.
the movie. So I was like, okay, I think they just think it looks cool, or they might have had a reason for him looking like that, like those effects, probably maybe in an earlier script or
Mm.
something, or just in an earlier filming, and like whatever reasoning they had maybe got cut or taken out or something.
Yeah, I
Uh,
thought it was going to be a way to connect him and Dorothy because we find out later that her dad is a scientist that specializes in nanotechnology. Uh, she got sick and he used the nanotechnology to fix the nerve damage in her body, but then there's some this part where it kind of goes wonky where it's not necessarily science fiction. It becomes, I think, to me more in the fantasy realm because suddenly now she can automatically revitalize dead plants. We see
yeah,
it on the ship where apparently there was a tomato tree sitting there, and she walks up to the tree, her eye starts glowing, and walks away. And then later on, we have a fresh crop of tomatoes popping up from this dead tree that was sitting there in the lounge, and they use that later on to sell the
yeah,
tomatoes. So that they were dropping little hints before they were going to give us the full reveal. So I thought maybe okay, the nanotechnology is within her. So maybe the nanotechnology, he's thinking he can make himself that catalyst, so he can. That would make more sense to me, because then he can
yeah,
be the catalyst to make the change. But they even stated after the dad did that, they didn't know why it worked that way in her.
mm, yeah. The more you talk about it, the more to me it sounds like it probably it sounds like it probably was already in there, but to put that stuff in there probably would have made that movie over 3 hours and some change. And so they probably had to cut it. But yeah, like her like being able to grow things, I was like, ooh, this is very Final Fantasy VII right here. This is very Aerith. This is very live stream happening. Um, but yeah, I think that stuff was probably in there and just got cut. And
That's
because it
very
would have made it
possible.
too long.
Like we're on a time schedule, and if we make this thing 2.5, 3 hours, it may be too long. So we're gonna have to lose the explanation for our villain,
Yeah,
Sullivan. But he was an interesting character, and of course, he sets himself up to be this benevolent, super genius that's found a way for us to save life and revitalize these other planets. And you find out, and the news that they put out about Dorothy that she's a weapon of mass destruction from this terrorist group. What they like the Black Foxes or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah, this
yeah,
terrorist group. She's a bomb basically. She's a super tech android bomb. Do not go near her. Basically, call the police as soon as anybody has anything. If you see her, and we'll handle it from there.
hmm,
So that was like a goose chase, and ironically, they find her on that first ship that they
hmm,
find that everybody's fighting over. Um,
yeah. I was so confused about the Black Fox, like about the Black Foxes for a long time until
yeah,
the reveal, and I was like, did this need to be a reveal? I mean, it worked as a reveal. I just felt like I don't understand this group yet. Like I don't understand what's happening with them, why they're and it could have been I just was missing some things, but I was just like, I hope I'll find out what's going on with them at some point, and I'm glad I did.
did you find it odd how they figured out that the other space sweepers were actually the Black Fox group?
Um, yeah, because they were able to what was the captain's name? Captain Jung
Captain Jang.
Jang. Okay, and she, yeah, like she was able to do a thing and see that they had their markings. And I was
Well,
like, right?
yeah, she had her eyes replaced. I think she had these cybernetic eyes to replace her natural eyes. Remember, she's wanted for trying to kill Sullivan years ago,
Okay.
and the only way they could only identify her by her eyes, so she had her eyes changed. So she switched out her eyes, so she had some special eyes and saw, I guess, what would be like a black light tattoo or something on one of them. And then she made them all get together, shut the lights out, and then shine the light on them in the dark. And then they could see that all of them had that mark, which is it's kind of a stretch, but it is what it is.
I was I saw it and I was like, how could they not have figured this out before? But I mean, I was like, all right, then the main guy. he- I think what they were suggesting was that he was the only person who was dealing directly with these people because he was going out of his way to like get extra cash any way he could by like selling stuff.
Hmm.
So he was going to them. So he wouldn't have been able to like figure that out.
Well, he couldn't see what she saw. That's I think
Right.
that was the main point of it. She was the only one. It wasn't until they gathered them there to kind of talk things out, when things had kind of come to a head, when they figured out that they had Dorothy and they were going to turn her in for the reward money. I don't know what they were going to do. They weren't. They were the ones that actually told them the real with the daughter,
Hmm.
and that the scientist that initially came to try and do the deal for her was the dad. They didn't know that was the dad at first. The initial
Hmm.
when they tried to do the switch with the daughter for the $2 million they were trying to get.
Hmm.
So yeah, they were the ones that clued them in. Like, no, she's an actual biological child. She's not an android. She's not a weapon of mass destruction. She can actually save us all, and that's the reason why they want her, so that they can kill her, so that Sullivan is the only one that'll be able to basically fix things. Not fix things, but we've already done it to Mars, so he's going to be able to sell some high-priced real estate on Mars since you
Hmm.
ain't got nowhere else to go. So if we destroy her, there is no remedy that you can go to get you the same results.
Yeah, that's why it's like that whole explanation section. Like I was happy for that part because I like I said earlier, I was happy that they answered a question that I had earlier on, which was like, all right, if they're going to be able to terraform this, Mars and do whatever. Why can't they do it to Earth? Like, why can't they go and fix Earth?
Exactly.
Because they show Earth is ravaged and dry,
Yeah.
and uninhabitable. And I'm like, but you could do some more. Like, why? So, and I was nervous that they just weren't going to answer that
Yeah.
question. That I just thought they were establishing it, and that was just going to be a fact of the whole movie. So I'm glad that it wasn't. I'm glad that there was like, even though it wasn't like, it just turned out to be big evil boss and CEO is greedy and wants
Yeah, he's greedy. We want to sell that real estate.
is greedy, so he's gonna do what he's gonna do with his evil veins, and that's fine. I even if it was a little cartoon villainy, I was happy for an explanation as to why.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about the conclusion of the film, give our individual ratings, uh, and then our final thoughts. We'll be back in a second. Welcome back to the second half of the Askari cast. My name is Rod Van Blake, and I'm joined once again by Jocelyn Short.
Hello.
We are continuing our talk about Space Sweepers, the Korean sci-fi film that came out in 2021 on Netflix. We've been over most of the plot for the beginning of the movie, and how this oddball group of basically space junk curators. Earth has been ravaged, and they're trying to clean up space and get paid for it. And this evil guy Sullivan is trying to make everybody move to Mars, basically. And we find out this Dorothy character, who's actually a little girl and not an android, not a bomb, is the one that could actually fix things herself. And so if he can eliminate that remedy for the ecological damage that's been done on Earth, he can get everybody to pay for real estate on Mars. That's his thing. He's come up with this scheme to kind of blow her up with a hydrogen bomb,
Yes.
and that's supposed to destroy all the nanobots within a certain area. And so basically, what will end up happening, even if it doesn't kill her directly, if it destroys all the nanobots, which is what's keeping her alive and helped her with her disease, once those are dead, the disease will be back on, and of course, it would kill the little girl. Then the only remedy to colonize Mars and other places will be, I think, because he had some way of doing it himself at that point, but he just didn't want people to have options. That's the only thing I can gather from it. What do you
I
think?
I thought it was just that he wanted to destroy the Earth so that there, like you said, that there would be no options for, like, so that he could. I think it was so that he could just position himself as the savior of humanity, and so that he could bankroll
Yeah,
people's salvation. Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
but yeah,
he
but if that's
he
the case, then he can just hide her. There's no real reason to kill the little girl. You know what I'm saying? Like if no one has access to her, that's just that. Why? I mean,
that was. I mean, that's the cartoonishly evil part.
yeah,
Because it's just kind of like, um, he's so deranged, he's off the deep end that, any viable, you know, humanitarian centered solution does not matter to, because like in the beginning they showed him, you know, explaining, or they showed him expressing like how much he doesn't even really think that like humans matter. Like when he had the mud stuff on his hand,
oh
he
yeah,
was
the
like,
dirt, yeah, the dirt,
yeah, he was like, this is not dirty. People are dirty. I was like, okay. And so, um, and I was like, all right, I see where we're going with this. Which is, a good cartoony villain is fine. You know, it works. Persona 5 is a great example of like cartoony villains being effective
his
sometimes.
assistant was kind of cringy, like super worshipy in his introductions to Sullivan. Anytime anybody
Yeah,
came to the room,
yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, like as soon as he did the introduction, I was like, I don't know anybody who would introduce anybody this way, unless it was like unless it was like Elon Musk and somebody Elon Musk hired. I could see it,
yeah,
but I think that's the archetype that they were going for.
yeah.
Um, so
We didn't
uh,
mention the actual. Probably gonna murder some of these room names, but Sung Joong Ki is Tae-ho.
mhm,
Kim Tyree is Captain Jang.
mhm.
Jin Seong Kyu is Tiger Park. He was one of my favorite characters. He was
He was
the
great.
former drug lord, apparently.
Ah,
Uh, Hai Jin Yu is Robot Bubs, and we have Richard Armitage as Sullivan. I'm not sure who Kang Hyun Woo was in the character, but Kevin Park is Dorothy.
okay,
She was cute.
she was great.
She
She was
she
very
was
very cute. She was adorable.
yeah, she's a bubbly little girl. And if she was an android, they programmed her to the T to be a little girl because she didn't understand the whole gag with her sneezing and them thinking that she's gonna blow up. They only did it a couple times, but it was still funny.
I thought her little face that she made whenever she was about to sneeze was so fun because it was so scary and
Yeah,
intense. I was like, oh,
and she'd look up and everybody would be on the ground with their heads interlaced behind there, like I don't know what that was gonna do if she was a bomb about to blow up. That's not gonna save you. They're all
mhm.
in the same room.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm glad for like how charming the movie was at times. Like I thought it was definitely very charming, and like some of the jokes that they made with her, I thought they worked well. So I was happy about that. I was like, I felt like that was impressive to pull off with all of this other stuff going on with this movie that that feel like they nailed that part.
yeah, the comedy worked well, and it wasn't. overdone, because I think sometimes with certain films they can do it a little too much, especially when they're trying to draw some of the seriousness and gravity out of a situation.
Yeah.
So there's not a good balance, and they're being over jokey the whole time. It kind of loses its luster. But it was done well here. Um, I enjoyed it. Like I said, the action was great for me. Bubs running from ship to ship with the harpoon.
That was really cool. Like at the end when she was jumping from ship to ship with the harpoon and everything, and then you see her like, the shot of her at the end, and she's got this big grin. Like she just nailed it. And it's like, yeah, like I want her as a toy now. Like I want her as a figure with her harpoon sitting on
I
my
thought it
bed.
interesting that the captain wasn't the pilot, really.
Yeah, I
He was pretty much the sharpshooter because that was her job previously. She got, to the back with like the rail gun of the sniper rifle. She was shooting out of, from the bow of the ship, uh, or aft of the ship, shooting out back of the drones in pursuit of them. And Tay was actually the one flying the whole time because he would be like, "You're in my seat, move," all the time.
I felt like that was interesting. Like there were times and like it was, you know, I feel like it was clear most of the time that she was established as the captain, but sometimes I felt like it went between the two of them,
Yeah,
like who was in charge. Um, like she did most of the talking when it came to like, I guess, negotiating or just interfacing with other people and like shaking people down, making sure, she got what information she needed from people. She was really good at that. And in those moments, I could kind of tell she was the captain. But she would fire off orders here and there.
yeah.
Um, but
Except
yeah,
for when they negotiated the exchange, it was always him that spoke.
yeah, yeah. Which
They had
was
that
I was
weird
like,
translator machine that would make him like the second time they had him speak in Spanish through the
yeah,
translator.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's why I was like, why is it going back and forth like this? Um, so I don't know. I don't know why they made that decision. I mean, I think it was it probably was more of like, all right, motivate character motivation wise, he should be the one to do these money negotiations because he needs it that badly. But I don't think it was necessarily as grounded in the overall function of the story as to why he would be the one making
Yeah,
those negotiations. It should be her. um so
and the fact that he's not I would harp on him being in the leadership position simply because when it came down to it, he's no longer about that life. That's the whole reason why he got kicked out the military because he wasn't down to fight anymore. So at
that's a
that
good
point,
point. Yeah, yeah. So it was really weird. And then they would like whenever he would get on the phone with the translator stuff going on, they would defer to him. They would be like, "Oh, what do we do?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? What do we do? Who's the captain? Like, who's in charge?"
yeah,
So whatever. But it was fine. That part was okay. It wasn't bad or anything. It just so was like,
no.
what's going on here?
For the most part, this film was enjoyable. Like I said,
Yeah.
it got the big stuff right. And so
Yes.
that made it enjoyable. The story was cool. Obviously, it had some flaws in it, but I still enjoyed it. The action was done really well.
Hmm.
Um, the influx of emotion into the story, I believe, was done well. And like you said, the comedy worked as a good mix, so holistically. Um, but like Andrea said, it wasn't the best
Yeah.
of films, but it wasn't bad. I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. So for those reasons, I'd probably give this a 7 or 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I think a 7 is that sounds about fair.
Yeah.
It's definitely. I feel like what they did, like they did a lot. Like it's a sci-fi kind of epic film. Um, there it felt like there were real stakes, and I don't think anything was done like badly. You
No.
know, um, so I think it was really good, but it wasn't like super extraordinary. Nothing crazy new. Um,
No.
but that's okay. Not everything
Yeah.
has to be that. Um, it was definitely entertaining. Like it, like I don't feel like any part of it was boring. Which I
No,
feel like that was the most important. I was like, if you're asking me to be here for the 2 hours and 30 minutes that you're asking me to, you better be interesting, and it was.
yeah.
So I'm
I
really
think a
glad.
lot of people, like you said initially, was derivative, but that's it's there's nothing new under the sun. A lot of things are going to be derivative. At least if you're going to be derivative, let it be done well. Don't copy a whole bunch of things and then do it horribly, because then it's going to be a double-edged sword. They're going to call you out for copying, and they're going to call you out for doing it badly.
Yeah, and to be fair, like I said, I don't necessarily think it was derivative. I think that these themes are just pertinent. I think they're coming out more and more just now because of the way the world is right now. But
Yeah,
I think I think Japan and Korea have been on this time with these themes. They've been about that kind of stuff. Um, so, but yeah, to me the movie was like Horizon, Final Fantasy VII, and Cyberpunk's in all in one thing.
like a mashup of all those things.
hmm
Yeah,
I'm interested in what like they referenced in making this movie. Like, what were their sci-fi references, their action references? Like what they were trying to emulate or pull from. Like, I think that would be interesting to know.
yeah. With
And if
the
it was,
reference to the soldiers, I see a lot of Alita kind of in this as
mm,
well.
mhm.
They all had the little cybernetic bodies. Because the bad, I forget what, I don't know what the actress's name is, or really the character, but the one that they fought at the very end, and I'm looking on the IMDb and I don't see her list. I know the character's name started with a C. Camilla.
Mhm.
So Carla Fernanda Avila Escobedo was Camilla, and that was like the super soldier we see at the end. She kind of reminded me of a version of like Alita Battle Angel, but this like super soldier. She had the helmet that encased her head and then came off, and
Mhm.
her eyes were a different color. And
Mhm.
she seemed to whoop up on Bubs, like broke broke Bub's leg, smacked him
Yeah.
down, and was whooping the mess out of Tiger in
Yeah.
that chat before he
I
finally.
was nervous. I fully expected him to die. And I was gonna be really upset about it if he died there, because I was like, who is this lady? Like, she just came out of nowhere
He was
and
beating
just
the
whoop
brakes off of
ass.
him. Yeah.
I was just like, he better not die here. I get.
Well, they really did. You expect a lot of the things were kind of predictable, but did you expect the ending?
I knew that they were gonna win, and I was just like, I said to myself in my head as I was watching the ending, I was like, okay, like obviously they're going to win, and the goal here is to make it as compelling as possible to like make it convincing as to why they might not. So I was like, okay, and I felt like it was interesting. Like it just felt like, um, it did feel like almost that they weren't going to win, or just that they weren't, not that they weren't going to win, but that like the main crew was going to die. I was convinced that they were going to die. um and then they said that like they swapped. They put the little
Yeah,
girl with, with the other people, right before they went and did their stuff. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, how is she able to work though? But then, they showed that she was able to use the nano,
control.
yeah, control the things from like however far away she was. And I was like, I guess that's new, you know?
Because yeah, they cleaned it up in the end because she basically covered them up with the invincible nanobots,
Mhm.
the ones that couldn't be destroyed supposedly.
Okay.
I was like, would it have been more compelling to you if they followed through with it though and killed off the main crew?
Um,
Because to me, that was the most compelling thing of, even though they reversed the majority of it,
mhm,
but Infinity War in Marvel.
mhm. I think
Especially for a Disney production, when at the end of that film, when when the folks is dying,
I
and
will never forget that moment. That was such a moment in history for me, in film
yeah,
history. I think it I don't necessarily think they needed to, like, it was like the ending was fine. It was fine that everybody lived. I think it would have been fine also if they died. I feel like they were setting it up so that, like, the overarching kind of theme for that team was that, like, they had to repay their debts. All right.
Yeah,
And if they did this, their debts would have been repaid,
yeah,
in full. And I was like, that's great. Um, and then everybody, like, Earth can live, they can be martyrs or whatever. And I was like, cool. Um, you know, I think it's also fine that they lived at the end. I think that was great. I I I was expecting somebody to die, and I was like, oh,
yeah.
okay.
I think it would have been more compelling because we don't get that. There are very few films that follow through on that, is my thing. So I think we just get the 54 fake half the time. Like,
Yeah, that's
oh,
why.
you're gonna
Remember,
die. Like, nope, last second.
exactly. Like, we were talking about Star Wars last week, and I was talking about how I had watched Episode 4 for the first time a couple years ago, and I was like, and I said that I got it. Like, I got why there's so much hype, why everybody loves it, because there was real stakes in that movie. Like, like, people died and did not come back, or like, especially at the end when they were going towards, like, the Death Star or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
and fighter pilots were getting picked off one by
Oh,
one,
yeah.
but you cared that they died, and I was like, dang, and we didn't they could have done it with this movie, and they didn't. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think they should have, but it was nice, and it was kind of a moment for them again to showcase Dorothy, and it showed that she was actually controlling the invincible nanobots to protect them from the blast,
Hmm.
which I still don't understand because they were, in order for them to switch, they had to take the hydrogen bomb with them.
Yeah, I was a bit confused at that part. I was like, I'm not sure how they pulled this off. I thought, I was like, they didn't even have to put this twist in here. It could have just been where, they tried to take her away, and she was able to go away, and that they stayed,
Yeah.
and they could die. They
They
could.
couldn't do that though because if they left the hydrogen, the bomb was going to go off and there was nothing they could do about it. Then it would have destroyed the station and Earth.
So I think maybe I am actually confused at the end. Like, did they move the bomb? What
They took
happened?
the bomb.
Oh, okay.
Remember, they had to get her. They had to get her a certain like 5,000
Right.
whatever the increment of distance
Yeah, yeah.
away from her.
Mhm.
So it didn't. But it was obvious like they could have done the same thing and just saved her. But if they just save her, then they lose the space station and Earth gets destroyed. And then
Mhm.
his plan continues because he would
Right,
have gotten what he wanted because
right.
everybody on the colony would have been freaked about what they said, what, 3 billion lives lost instantly.
Mhm.
And so they're like, well, they all died. What y'all gonna do now? I got this nice new planet Mars over here. I revitalized. You can go ahead and pay that toll and we can, start life anew over there. Or, Earth is gone now. That's not even an option. We ain't even got to talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so, but
But
how were they?
they didn't show them like ejecting it or anything. They just
That's what I'm saying. Like, how were they able to move?
Well, they did show them taking. Remember, they had this big cylinder inside. They when they did the switcheroo, they showed they pulled that cylinder out of the hydrogen bomb,
Right. Okay.
and then they left. But then what the blank that they filled in, they showed Dorothy going with the rest of the space sweepers, and the
Mhm.
crew of the Victory apparently took the bomb with the Victory, and then flew the bomb enough distance away so that Dorothy wouldn't be affected by the hydrogen bomb. The nanobots wouldn't be killed. Um, but they didn't show them. I guess they couldn't because then that would have been a tell before the actual reveal if they
Mhm.
show them ejecting that out of the ship before it blew up. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of a plot hole. They don't show us that leaving the ship. So I'm like, well, if it's inside the ship, it wouldn't that blow them up? But I guess they was outside the ship, and then she from that great distance, ordered all the invincible nanobots to perform like a cocoon around the Victory and
Mhm.
save them from the blast.
Mhm. Yeah, that was a bit weird. Um, I still think the energy of the ending was there. Like I still felt like it was like it felt kind of harrowing. It still felt harrowing. It still felt like how are we gonna close this out?
Yeah.
Like I still felt the energy of it. Like I think that was good. Um I was like, all right. Uh so
Yeah,
it
there's nothing worse than something that tries to take you for a ride that you know it's not gonna. Like, okay, we know, no, they're surviving. We already know. That's kind of the issue that some folks are having with these, not necessarily reboots, but these extended or prequel TV shows from Star Wars and Star Trek, that you
Mhm,
have some of the cast or the characters that you know are going to survive until it's a butting up against like a prequel of a series. Like Discovery abuts basically the OG Star Trek series. So any of those characters that you meet, Spock, Kirk, Bones, if we run into Bones, you know they can't die. So
mhm.
there's really no tension when you put them in like a harrowing situation or what's supposed to be a harrowing situation. It's like, I know, I know this person survives. These characters, these core characters survive. Nothing's gonna happen to them. So it takes the tension out of any scenes that you put them in.
That's fair. When those situations tend to happen, I will go into the mindset like, all right, we know they're not supposed to die, so I'm interested. Like I will change my thinking, like my mindset into like, all right, like will they be able to make this interesting how they navigate getting from this point to like the point that we know them at? Like, is it interesting at all?
Yeah.
Or the journey that they have to go through, even though we know that they're not going to die. Like, who dies along the way in their journey? What battles are they overcoming necessarily,
Yeah.
even if it's not their life per se, but like what have they struggled with, and how does the show or movie or whatever tackle this issue, and are they doing it in an interesting way?
Yeah.
So I try to think about that so I'm not like crazy let down all the time.
Yeah. It gets hard, especially because there's so much stuff out there. You can get some duds that you run into. This one I thought was enjoyable. Jocelyn, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to chop it up with me about these things. Andreas Narain, thank you for hopping in. I think we have one more lurker that I see that's watching us but hasn't hit us in the chat. But thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to us. Space Sweepers on Netflix. Came out in 2021. It's Korean sci-fi film if you like dystopian space science fiction action movies. Go and check it out. Give it a watch. It'll be a little bit different than what we produce here, but it was certainly enjoyable.
It's a lot of fun.
Description, yeah, yeah. So there will be a description the description of this episode will have a link to Jocelyn's website as well as my website if you're interested in any of our creative endeavors. We appreciate you very much. Check us out on Anchor because the audio will be uploaded to Anchor later, which will be distributed to Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and all that jazz. About 8 other places where you can listen to podcasts. We thank you, and we will talk to you all next week. Peace.